All right, welcome back. We have another knife for you today. This is the Kizer Quell, particularly an S35 yen in titanium. This is one I picked up a few months back, but I hadn't really spent much time with, so I wanted to go ahead and take a visit. And they give you all the good stuff in their packaging, the cleaning cloth, and more boxes than you know what to do with, and eventually you get to this nice little pouch here and your knife. So let's have a look. Initial impression to me, it is, I don't want to call it boxy, but it's particular. The angles on this are very interesting, and you're not seeing that from probably, it's kind of hard to tell probably from where you are, but maybe you can tell if I go this way or this way that it has an angle. So there's two parallel lines that this knife seems to line up on, and it's at a bit of an angle there, which is interesting. Maybe I can put it right next to my lighter, which is straight up and down, and maybe you can see this a little better. So you can see it kind of bends away from the lighter at maybe a 15-degree angle or something like that. Which gives it an interesting look. Not sure if there's something there, but that designer is named on the box, so they probably know what they're doing. This is a frame lock titanium handle, and it is a flipper knife, so not my favorite combination, as I've mentioned before on this show a few times, but it is certainly a high quality combination. I just find a flipper, you really want to pinch the knife and then hit the flipper. And if you're pinching the knife, then you can't actually get the knife to come out. So you have to either pinch up here or pinch short. And this is kind of a narrow knife. Let's do some comparisons just to like kind of put it in perspective. You can see how tall a Spyderco Para 3 is by comparison, or even just like a Demko 80-20.5. This is the carbon variant. So it's not a very tall knife. It is taller perhaps than like a tactile Knifeco Rockwell here, or very close to it. It's probably about the same. So because on this knife you have a liner lock, whereas this one's a frame lock, it doesn't give you a lot of area there. Now, that said, the action is so good, I can just kind of point my finger downward like this and get it out with no problem. So I did, the first time I got the knife, kind of lock stick myself. I don't know if that's the right term, but lock pinch myself. Looks like I got a little smudge on there at some point, so I gotta try and get that off, or better, perhaps it even came that way because this knife is not cut. So sometimes you get that on your blade, a little something on there, or like a discoloring or little I don't know what the right term is, smudge of some sort, but it's actually in the finish. I think in this case I'll have to look at that a little closer. The action's smooth but not drop shut, which is fine. It's kind of a safe feel because of that. Like, it's not gonna go closing on your hand by mistake with a guillotine, as they call it. Let's move these out of here. And it is snappy, so it definitely deploys very quickly and confidently. You just have to be thoughtful of the fact that you want, to be kind of pointing your fingers kind of downward or something like that to avoid pushing in on the lock. Lock bar comes in around 50% or something like that, maybe even a little more. So pretty far across on the lock there. So with the knife out, it's an interesting look. It kind of thins down at the ends and is wider in the middle. It grips okay in hand. It's not terrible in any way, but it's not great in any way. It doesn't like it's not a Benchmade grip Tillian where it says I'm meant to be held, or even, I think of just the Rat one, just kind of designed for the shape of your hand. A Demko would be another great example. The bigger Demkos have a really nice like ergonomic feel to them, where it, you know, very clearly assumes for what a hand shape looks like in the design. So it's not that, but at the same time, it's not meant to be that. This pocket clip is light enough that it's actually functional. You can get it into your pocket very easily. It actually is a little harder to get out because of this ramp on the back there is a little steep, so it's a little harder to get out, but it goes in really well, which is interesting. Depending on your pocket design, if you don't have like a bump up on your pocket, it actually is probably fine. My pants that I'm wearing right now, the pocket has a little bit of a bump in it, but no hot spots from this pocket clip, so feels good in the hand. Overall, it actually feels very good in the hand. Like it's not, it doesn't like, it's a little narrow, but for what it is, it actually feels really good in the hand. So I think that was one of the things that they must have gone out of the way on to deliver well. I like the blade shape. It's kind of the benefits of a, you know, call it like a drop point. And, oh, let's use a different one actually, because this is a kind of a relevant knife to this. It's a drop point or a clip point? It's a little bit of a drop point, but I don't even know for sure what they classify the Rockwell as. And a shark's foot. Oops. You know, they call this sheep's spoon. Let's look at a more classic version of a shark's foot out here. Where's my, maybe you call this a sheepdog. But you can see you're kind of getting a little bit of both. You get some of the point from the drop point there. So you don't lose as much of it, even though this part right here is dull. You still have a pretty good point there if you need it for some reason. This one happens too also. I'm thinking maybe more of like a Demko, where the, you know, you don't really have something, you wouldn't really want this knife in a fight. It's not for stabbing, if that makes sense, or self-defense. So in this one, you kind of get the benefits of the utilitarian sheep's foot with the benefits of the, you know, some of the, like you could potentially, you could definitely do some damage with that if you needed to. So the angle's steep enough. Anyway, you're starting to see a lot more of this design out. Not that this is a brand new knife, but this blade design is becoming more and more popular as others adopt it. So cool to see it on here. It's kind of got a fun futuristic feel to it without being too out in the future. Like I think of, let's see if I can pull out my Wee Snicks real quick. Oh, perfect, it's right here. Very similar feel to it actually from like a design perspective in a lot of ways. You know, titanium. Now this is a flipper, but like just look at the blade shapes and everything. There's like a lot of similarities there. This is just a taller, really version of that with a bigger choil on it. Blade stock thickness is good, not too wide, not too thin. It gets a little thin at the tip maybe. Let's see how that compares. That is definitely pretty slicey at the tip there. So that might be a little risk, but it doesn't really look like it. It looks strong when I'm looking at it. Like I don't, although it does look a little thin there, like when you're looking at the way that they did it, it does look strong enough that I don't think it's going to be a problem on like breaking off or something like that. It is S35 VN blade steel. Let's get a little look at the blade there. Definitely nice looking. A lot of writing on it, which isn't my favorite, but I don't mind it too much, especially on something like this where it's not exactly, you know, this is kind of a technical future feeling knife, so I don't mind a little extra writing, kind of like there's a lot going on here and we're kind of prototype-y feeling. This knife feels like a prototype. Like if I were to rename this knife from the Quell, I would name it the Kizer Prototype, because that's the feel it has to it, is that it is doing something kind of futuristic. Yeah, you know what? I actually have the Rockwell flipper, so let's pull that one out as a better comparison. These are limited and rare and can't really just get them, unfortunately, but it does make a pretty good knife comparison because it's a flipper tab. So size-wise and whatnot versus the tactile is very similar. Very similar. Similar blade lengths, similar design, I'd say similar thickness even. Maybe a tad thicker than the Rockwall. You know, they both have very minimalist pocket clips. Blade height is a little taller here. I like, you know, the liner lock. That's my preference, especially on a flipper this size, because that means you can get a nice pinch right where you want it, and you can literally just have so much control over this. Should never miss a flip on this, whereas that is one drawback I see of this one. This one's more knocked down as I switch it back and forth between my hands. This one I kind of feel the metal a little more. This one feels a little more rounded off and a little softer on the hand than the Rockwall. Trying to think of some other titanium handled knives that I have that are reminiscent of this. I saw the titanium handled Demko, obviously a very different category there, but same time, stylistically, you know, not, there's a lot of similarities there. This is titanium. This Devo Stout is titanium and a sort of a knockdown, not a knockdown, but a carbon infused, aluminum infused carbon handle, but there's some similarities there too, for sure. I guess maybe you pull out like a Hinderer, you know, it's a flipper tab, a much bigger knife, different category, but you know, there's certainly some similarities on the frame lock there. Hinderer is just bigger overall, of course. This one's nicely worked in. I've done some videos on some others that I've gotten out of box that were not quite so good. This one, I actually am able to reverse flick. I can almost never get the thumb stud on this tri-way, but some people are saying that's just kind of how they do them these days. They just crank up the detent. Yeah, I think these are some good comparisons. So like, how do I see this stacking up against some of these other alternatives? Price-wise, it's much better. So you're going to get this from $115 to $180. MSRP is around $200 or something, and you'll see it marked down, you know, to $180, maybe as low as like $115, $125, something like that. So from a price perspective, it's very reasonable. You get a very nice knife for the money, for sure. Good blade steel with S35 VN, titanium handle. I don't know if that's a titanium pocket clip. Titanium handle and titanium pocket clips. That's cool. That's something that gets neglected like way too often, I notice, is you get this super nice titanium knife and the pocket clip is steel. It's like, huh, it's kind of funny. In the case of the Wii, it's titanium. In the case of the Demko, it's not. In the case of the Tactile, I don't think it is either. No. And what about in the case of the Devo Stout? No, that's steel, but it's thin. So that's kind of interesting, and like kind of give them a little credit for that full titanium there. So yeah, the fit and finish is really good. I mean, I gotta look into that. What's going on with my you know, blade stains here or whatever, but aside from that, it's a really cool knife, you know, for the money. Feels like the fit and finish is good, the action is good, lockup is super solid. You know, it runs on bearings. I don't know much about the internals of this knife. I haven't gone deep into it. One of the things I do like that kind of catches me on this versus some of these others, and you can see it here as well, but a lot of them have a lot of hardware. You got 1, 2, which is really neat. 1, 2, 3, I guess in this case. And you've got like a hidden hardware on the pocket clip. You can see it slightly inside. Inside, you do have some milling, which is nice, particularly on the show side. So that's milled out pretty nicely there. See if I can get a better view on that. So that takes the weight down. There's a little bit here in the back on the non-show side, but obviously you want to frame lock. You want this part here to be nice and solid. I don't know if I've ever really noticed if many knife companies mill out the frame lock. I doubt it. I think that'd be pretty uncommon. You're already having to, basically mill through here, or, cut out through here and stuff. So everything's knocked down nicely from front to back. Yeah, it's a very thoughtfully designed knife and a very thoughtfully delivered knife. Like, they did not cut corners, and it shows. So I'm overall impressed. Although it's not really like my go-to format, there's definitely a place for this. It's when I got it, I was kind of like, that was my gentleman's knife, and then I learned about the tactiles and kind of went that direction. But that was what I was getting it for, is to be kind of a gentleman's knife. Take that out when something like this feels a little aggressive, for taking the missus out to dinner or whatever. Maybe I'll put something like that in the pocket, but I think this is kind of where I've gone, and it's going to probably be a while before I have something besides this for my gentleman's knife, if I'm guessing, because I've really gone pretty deep onto those tactiles. If you watch the channel, it's sort of my go-to in that category. What else? Kizer, good company, good warranty, so that's backed well. It's made in China, so you got to consider that, but that's why that price is where it is. If that knife was made in the US, probably be looking at like a $300 or $400 knife, if I were to guess. Probably $350. I bet this knife would be $350 made in the US. So, you're getting it for less than half of that most of the time. And one thing I don't care for is that you can see the the detent ball line there. A lot of good knives, you're not going to see that on when they're well designed. I'm not saying this isn't well designed. I'm just saying that is worth considering. Now, everything's very minimalist, and that's probably why they kind of had to do it that way. But one thing to consider, if that's something that you don't like to be able to see. Most high-end knives, just an example here in the Bugout, you're not going to ever see something like that detent ball rub there. So same thing with the tactile. Definitely no sign of that here as well. So overall, a good knife. Recommendable for the price if you're trying to get a full tie frame lock on a budget and kind of get that futuristic feel. You're talking about half the price of something like this, $100 less than something like that, half the price of something like this. And yeah, a lot of good things about it. It'd probably be one of those knives that could last you a really long time for not that much money. So I always like that kind of value prop when it's available. The one to look at maybe by comparison would be like an Artisan Cutlery. It's a pretty different knife, but let me see if I can pull that out real quick. It's certainly a considerable option. Would be the bear with me one sec, the Ariane from Artisan. Yeah, this one is also a Chinese made, also a similar price. Very different deployment, so you'd have to prefer this deployment model. But this would probably be a very similar value comparison. I think in my Ariane video, I probably had the Kizer Quell as a comparable. Now I'm thinking about it, because I got these at the same time, and they're both really cool knives. Totally different in so many ways, but both frame lock, full tie knives that have a really good value prop somewhere in that $100 to $175 range, and both kind of what I'd call limited deployment knives. This one you have just the fuller. I don't know if you can wheel that one out very well. This one I always find, yeah, it's not terribly easy to wheel this one out. You can, especially once it loosens up, it probably gets okay at doing that. You're pretty dedicated to like a reverse flick with this knife. So that's, considerable. Flipper knives, I feel like, you know, the flipper is easier entry level type of deployment. And, you know, when people have a flipper, it's not like you're always looking for something else. I do think this would be a pretty cool knife if it had a thumb stud on it, but as you can see, based on the slim design, there's nowhere for that to sit unless they had done a totally different design. So, you know, it's limited, but it's also effective and intuitive. This one took me a little longer to get really consistent in my deployments. However, if you're going to have a limited deployment, there's an argument, as long as you have a good pocket clip to put your finger on, you no longer are touching, as long as, you know, your finger's up here, you're no longer touching the frame lock with a reverse flick. So a titanium frame lock is a really good reverse flick method if there's a good fuller on it. This one's a little thin, but like definitely doable, as you can see there. Whereas this one, again, you're going into that, you're going in. Luckily, it's such an easy deployment. I can just kind of pinch it with my left finger, like kind of leave this one limp. This one's sort of touching on the back, and you're going to pretty much get that out of there most of the time. You really have to be pinching on it to like stop yourself from getting the deployment successfully. So, yeah, good all-around knife, a recommendable knife, but at the same time, not like what I would consider to be the best all-around knife. It's just, I'd say it's a little more niche. So you're going to want to look for, you're going to want that knife or something like it. And if you do, and if this is the sort of price range you're looking for, I think it does a very good job of delivering in its price range. You know, and there's not a lot to complain about on it. It's a good knife for sure. So I think that's all for now. I'll think about a score and throw that in there as well in the description. So please like, subscribe. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you on the next one.